Good morning and a very warm welcome to this winter webinar from AHDB. It's the Wet Centre Precision Technology in Softfruit. Well, my name's Scott Raffle, for any of you that don't know me. I am the Knowledge Exchange Manager for Fruit Crops at the AHDB, and I shall be chairing this morning's session with Mark Else from NIAB EMR. Before we get into the detail of today's event, I shall do my usual presentation of running through some slides. If you just bear with me. So, some housekeeping rules for this morning. You are muted. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. There will be an opportunity to ask some questions throughout, and I'll say a bit more about that shortly. And the webinar today should finish around about 11 o'clock. We're running from 10 o'clock till 11 o'clock. The webinar will be recorded, so those of you who want to watch it again will be able to do so on our website. Anybody, friends and colleagues of yours who would like to watch it later can also do so. And we have applied for basis and Rosso points for today's event. Sorry, we're just having a little bit of trouble moving on. There we are. So, questions. If you have a look at the little panel on, hopefully on the right-hand side of your screen, we've got a mock-up there to show you what it looks like. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions during the event. If you have a look at my little mouse there, you can see that there is an opportunity there in a little question box where you can submit questions, type them in during Mark's presentation, and I'll read those out. If you have got a basis and a Rosso certificate and you're registered and you wish to register for points today, there is also a place where you can do so and submit them to us. If you'd rather not use that, you can send them directly to me or to my Architecture, the organizer at AHDB, and we will submit them on your behalf. If you want to do it during the event itself, again, if you see my mouse there hovering over that section. So the recording will be available usually about a week later, so hopefully by next week you should be able to see and listen to this webinar. So why are AHDB involved in the Wet Centre? The Wet Centre was set up back in 2017 and AHDB got involved about a year later. The Wet Centre offers us a great opportunity at AHDB to showcase some of the results of research that we've funded over the years, particularly the water physiology and water use efficiency projects that Mark Else and his team at NIAB EMR have been doing for us. But it also gives us the opportunity to demonstrate some other work that we've done on crop protection too, and on biological control and integrated pest management environment, those sorts of things. So it's a perfect opportunity for us, and we have been involved and we continue to be involved to support Mark and his team and all the other consortium members. So today's programme, well, it is slightly different from previous Wet Centre webinars that you may have watched. It is purely a focus with Mark Else, and Mark is the only speaker this morning, but Mark will be taking us through the results of the 2020 work programme at the Wet Centre. There are, as many of you know, a great many different topics that we look at and investigate and demonstrate at the centre. And the purpose of today's webinar really is to provide you with the results of what they've been finding in the programme this year. Now, normally we finish a presentation by taking time for questions, but what we've decided to do today, because Mark has got quite a lengthy talk because there's so many topics to present results on, we thought we'd split it up. So after each section, Mark will take some questions. So please do submit your questions as we go through each section, and it'll be obvious to you which sections they are as Mark takes us through his presentation. Please pose those questions to us. I shall read them out to Mark after each section, so we'll intersperse the presentation that way. In addition, at this event, we've got some polls. We are going to take a poll on growers' own experiences and the way you do things yourselves, and that will also provide Mark with a little bit of feedback from you, which will help with his presentations and help the Wet Centre in future to consider what we might do in future work programmes. So I shall introduce Mark. Mark is, for many of you know Mark, he is Head of Department for Crop Science and Production Systems. He's a plant physiologist. He's been working at NIABMR for very many years now. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Scott. There we go. So hopefully now you can see my screen. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure again to be here at the end of the year, then looking back to see, to review some of the results from the Wet Centre. Good morning to all of the partners, if you're listening too. Thanks again for your continued support over this year. And if you are listening and you want to add any comments or chip in, please feel free to do so via the question or chat function. So as Scott said, we'll crack on because we've got a lot to go through. So this is to summarize some of the results from the Wet Centre in 2020. Now, of course, many of you hopefully will have been to visit the Wet Centre in years gone by. If not, many of you will know about the sort of work we're doing there. But this is just a reminder as to the purpose of setting up the Wet Centre. So the Wet Centre is a centre of excellence for UK soft fruit production. The idea is to demonstrate an integrated range of leading edge technologies to help improve resource use efficiency, but also to help to improve yields and quality and hopefully profitability. And as well as sort of demonstration, in previous years, of course, we provided one-to-one training sessions in webinars, workshops, and also one-to-one visits. And hopefully we'll return to those sunny days again next year. So just to remind you of the layout, there are eight commercial scale polytunnels at the Wet Centre, just over 1/3 of a hectare. There are 4 polytunnels that we call the commercial area, which is where we sort of demonstrate current best practice in commercial production. And then there's the advanced area, and that's the area where we integrate some of the outputs from our ongoing research projects to see what benefits we can achieve in a commercial production system. And you'll know then, hopefully, that we're using precision irrigation system here that's based on Delta T technology and sensors. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the results we've found again this year. Cocogreen, of course, are providing the coir bags, and I'll mention some of the work we're doing on investigating the effect of the colour of the bags on yield and productivity and quality. Of course, we have a new Netajet Octanute irrigation rig in the Wet Centre. You can see there a photograph on the right-hand side, and that's really to improve our capability to deliver straights rather than mixed fertilizers. And of course, this year we're testing some of Stoller's nutritional products to see whether they can enhance yield and quality at the Wet Centre. In addition to all of that, of course, you'll know that we're also interested in using, collecting and reusing rainwater to try to improve local water security, see how that system might behave in different years. And of course, we've also, with the automated tunnels, we've also got the option to develop smart venting strategies to try to optimize the phytoclimate to ensure high quality yields. And of course, this year then, like last year, we were growing Marling Champion on at the Wet Centre. So this is just an overview of the Wet Centre, just to give you an idea of where we are when I'm talking about various different things. You can see there the commercial area on the left-hand side of the figure and the advanced area on the right side. And you'll see there, perhaps if we look in the bottom left in the commercial area, you'll see there that half of the rows are white and half of the rows are greyed out. And this is a comparison of white Cocogreen bags and black Cocogreen bags. And I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the presentation. So this also shows you where some of the sensors are located. We've got lots of sensors around the Wet Centre to sort of to be able to estimate the effects of the phytoclimate on yields and quality. And you also see at the top there some of the yellow tunnels, and I won't be talking about the Lumitect work today, but I will hopefully be talking about that next time we meet up. So just to emphasize the point, then we're using precision irrigation technologies in the wet centre. And you'll know then this is the precision irrigation package that was developed in an Innovate UK funded programme and is being led by our partners Netafim, Unileaf and Delta T. And the idea of the system, it basically matches irrigation with demand. And so you can see there in the graph on the top, that's a very cloudy, wet day, and only one irrigation event was applied. Conversely, in the graph at the bottom there, that was a warm, dry, sunny day. Plant water demand was very high, and you can see there the system irrigated automatically 16 or 17 times during that day to maintain the moisture content in the coir within the optimum levels for this particular variety. And the system also allows us to control runoff very accurately. And you'll see there the photograph in the top right-hand corner. That's a runoff gauge that now collects runoff from the 50-meter runs. And so we've got very accurate measures of runoff and control runoff very accurately. And as I say, this system now is being taken up by the industry. Those growers who have used it, I think, are very happy with it. And so we continue to provide support for those growers, but also to improve the functionality of the offer as we go through. So all of the data is available on a grower dashboard, and you can see here, this is just an example. So you have real-time data on air temperatures, on coir moisture content, on let's say pore EC within the coir. All of this data is updated every 15 minutes and can be sent to your smartphone or your tablet or your PC in real time. So it helps to inform decision making, both for scientists and also, of course, for commercial growers. And this is just really a reflection of how far we've come in the last sort of 6 or 7 years. This data was collected in between 2011 and 2013, and this was collected from BGG growers. And you can see there, if we look at the strawberry substrate data, you can see there along the bottom we have the average water applied in terms of meters cubed per hectare. We have the average marketable yield, and we have the average water productivity. So you'll see there the average marketable yield in those 3 years was 32 tons per hectare, a range between 18 and 45 tons a hectare, and the average water productivity was 82. So this is how productively the water is being used to produce class 1 fruit. And with water productivity, the lower the value, the more productive the water. So at that time, some of the more productive growers were using 49 cubic meters per ton of class 1 fruit, whereas some at the other end of the scale were using over 108 cubic meters to produce 1 ton of class 1 fruit. So coming on to this year then in the wet centre, you'll see there that we had very high yields this year in terms of class 1 yield grams per plant, so up to nearly 1.3 kilograms a plant. Still 220 or so grams of waste, and we'll come on to that in a moment, but basically these figures translate to between 66 and 72 tons per hectare. So good high yields at the wet centre. You'll see there the total amount of water we apply to each of those plants within those experiments, and the average runoff volume. And you can see there then the water productivity value in the last column. And you'll see there for the best value, the lowest value is 37.5. So that's a very good water productivity value. Now, I think if we manage to increase yields a little higher by perhaps having less waste and perhaps manage to reduce runoff perhaps a few more percent, I think there we could achieve values in the low 30, but I think that's approaching what's realistically possible in a commercial strawberry production site. But you can see a big difference there from the 82, the value of 82 that we recorded in 2013. I think it's important to say, we've all come a long way in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. Okay, so I'll just go on now to talk about some of the things that we're doing at the Wet Centre this year. I have mentioned we're growing Marling Champion, which is an early ever bearer. It was launched last year at Fruit Focus from our East Marling Strawberry Breeding Club. You'll see last year we averaged 722 grams per plant. So it has good flavour, excellent shelf life, and nice and compact and excellent disease resistance. And so we planted 18,500 of those mini tray plants on the 2nd and 3rd of April this year. And so these are just some of the research questions that we asked in 2020. I won't go through them now, but you'll see we'll go through the questions as we go through the presentation. And we're moving from the effect of perhaps different years on production down to different growing systems, down to different rows within the polytunnel, and right down to the effect of individual bag colour on class 1 yields. And so we'll look at each of those questions as we go through the presentation. A couple of other points there. I mentioned rainwater harvesting and reuse, and I'll talk about that perhaps next time. And then we also mentioned how we thought growers could improve resilience to water-related shocks in a recent AHDB soft fruit webinar. So please do look back if you want to hear about that. And then, as well as the Wet Centre, we have several Innovate UK funded projects that are also being hosted at the Wet Centre. I'll just talk a little bit more about some of the work we're doing in one of those projects today. Okay, so yield potential of Marling Champion. So I've already mentioned last year we averaged 722 grams per plant. This year then our average was around sort of 1.3 kilograms. So significantly higher yields from the same variety in the same growing system than we achieved last year. And of course, we did several things differently this year. When we're first irrigating, we're using harvested rainwater. And so obviously the fertigation needs to be adjusted to the nutrient content compared to, for example, mains water. So we were on the ball right from the very beginning. We had new plastic installed, which usually means higher light transmission. And you'll see there this graph on the right-hand side. So this is the graph of PAR. So PAR is the photosynthetically active radiation that the plants received during 2020. And you'll see there, hopefully, the orangey line on the top of the graph. That's the value from 2020. And this data was provided by our partners WeatherQuest. And you can see there then that 2020 was an exceptional year for PAR. So from very early March, the intensity of light that we were receiving here in East Marling was significantly greater than the 10-year average. You can see there that trend continued through April and May. I think it was the sunniest May on record this year. And of course, PAR is absolutely critical to drive photosynthesis, which then is responsible for the dry matter production. And of course, some of the flavor, well, all of the flavor compounds that go up to make nice, tasty, fresh, juicy berries. So PAR is absolutely critical. And we did see then this very high PAR in 2020. And so I think we'll go on to the first poll question now. So one of the reasons we think that we had very high yields in 2020 in the Wet Centre was perhaps because of this very high PAR year. And so I think I'd be interested to understand from growers whether you also saw any differences in yield this year compared to previous years that might have resulted from these very high values of PAR.
Thank you, Mark. Everybody should be able to see the quick poll. Please select one of those 4 options that Mark has provided, and we'll give you about 20 seconds or so to decide, and then the results will be available to you. Did your crops benefit from the high PAR values in 2020? On average, were your strawberry yields? And then you've got to choose between those 4 options, and that's in tonnes class 1 per hectare. Okay. And the questions the answers now should be available to you, but for Mark's benefit, Mark, I shall read out the results. The answer between 20 and 40% higher than in previous years received 5% of the vote. Between 5 and 20% higher than in previous years received 40% of the vote. Similar to previous years was 50% of the vote, and 5% lower than in previous years. So I think largely growers, or what we're being told in this poll, is it was either similar to previous years or almost half are telling us that their yields were 5 to 20% higher. So a bit of a mix, quite an even split there, Mark, but hopefully that's quite useful to you.
Yes, thank you all. Yeah, that is very interesting. And so obviously, light is a key factor in producing crops, but obviously the water and fertilizers and temperature, there are other factors as well. So interesting to see those splits there in terms of yields. So the PAR data I showed you was for East Marling. I should say that was satellite derived PAR. So my colleague Steve Dorling at WeatherQuest can access that PAR data from any area in the country. So I'll be interested to take that up a little bit further, perhaps in the new year, just to understand more the relationship between PAR and yield. Okay, thank you, Scott. Okay, so if we move on then, this graph shows us the percent or the waste of fruit per plant as we go through the season. So you'll see there, even though we had nearly 1.3 kilograms, we still had 220 grams or so of waste fruit. And of course, the reasons for this were varied. We do see with Marlings champion a sort of a reduction in fruit size as the plant goes through the season. And we also think we saw during the very hot weather in August, after that, we saw a slight reduction in fruit size as well. One of the challenges we had this year at the Wet Centre was kinking of the trusses, and you can see there the photograph on the left-hand side. You'll see there the truss kinks, and what that does then, it limits the expansion of the berries. The colours often change. They lose that lovely red luster. They seem to become more seedy, and basically it reduces berry size. And I think that can have a significant effect on yield potential. And so what we'll do this coming season, you'll see there the photograph on the right-hand side. Then we've got an extra truss support tape in there. So over the winter, we're installing those extra truss support tapes throughout the Wet Centre to try to eliminate this issue of kinking, to try and make sure we're sort of achieving as high as Class 1 yields as possible. We did see some earwig damage during the very hot and dry weather, and also towards the end of the season, some SWD damage there. But so even though we had high yields, still potential there, I think, to reduce those waste values as we go through next year. So you'll have noticed then in the graphs I've just shown you, there were different coloured bars, blue bars and red bars, and they were denoting the different areas. And so the red bars were the commercial area, and the blue bars were the advanced area. So if we go on, oh, excuse me, got it wrong. So the commercial was blue, the advanced was red. So if we go through then and compare the yields between those different areas, you can see there then the graph on the left-hand side is showing you the cropping profile over the season. So you can pick out their four main fruiting flushes over the season, with around 2 trusses in each flush. And there's a 5% difference in yield between the commercial area and the advanced area. So 1272 grams per plant in the commercial area, and just over 1200 grams per plant in the advanced area. Now, these plants were from the same batch. They were planted at the same time. They went into the same coir. They were given the same fertigation, the same watering. And so we're interested to understand more about why, for example, the yields are higher in the commercial area. And this was a sort of an effect we've seen over the last couple of years at the Wet Centre. So it's certainly not due to a single season. It seems to be a fairly consistent effect. And we can't easily attribute that difference to waste, because you'll see there at the bottom the waste fruit between those two areas, the advanced area and the commercial area, that was actually very similar. So of course, one of the great advantages of the Wet Centre is that we can ask our farm team to pick half rows, and so we get very good detailed information about the yield profiles in each row, in each half a row, and how that differs between rows and tunnels and cropping areas. And of course, we can also do lots of different analysis. And so you'll see here just some tables of data that show us the berry fresh weights, the berry number, and the berry dry weights in those two different areas. And you'll see there then from that sort of analysis, then the berry fresh weight was 9% higher in the commercial area compared to the advanced area. And the number of Class 1 fruit was again 17% higher in the commercial area. So probably an effect on berry size, fresh weight, and also then on berry number. And you'll see there from the table at the end of on the right-hand side then, fruit dry weights were very similar between the commercial and the advanced areas. So, of course, we're interested to compare the conditions within the commercial area and the advanced area. And you'll see here this graph is a measure of the PAR intercepted at canopy height, and you'll see the blue line there is commercial, and you'll see the red line is an advanced in the advanced area. And this was on the 24th of June, which was a lovely cloudless day in Kent, and so so a very nice sort of solar pattern of radiation. And you can see then a very clear difference in the PAR perceived by the plants in the advanced area compared to those in the commercial area. So we were getting sort of 1400 micromoles per meter squared per second in the commercial and around sort of 1250 in the advanced. And I should say, you know, outside PAR would be about 2000 micromoles per meter squared per second. So we can see a definite difference in the intensity of light that's reaching the canopies in those two areas. And if you just look at the photographs on the right-hand side there, then you can see the top photograph is a photo of the commercial area, and of course the bottom is the photograph of the advanced area. And because we have the vents in the advanced area, you can see there's more steel work in the roof. And the small inset photograph there, and there's a sun you can see passing behind an intersection of those stanchions, and the sensors at the bottom there are measuring the PAR. So there is more shading, I think, in the roof of the advanced area, which may well help to explain some of the results. And of course, we can vent the advanced area far more efficiently and quickly than in the commercial area. So during that hot weather in June and July, for example, generally the temperatures in the advanced area were cooler than the commercial area. And in that very warm spell, you'll remember in June, by venting, we were able to reduce the temperature, the maximum air temperature, by up to 7 degrees C in the advanced area because of the venting that we were deploying at that time. So very similar growing areas, but very different conditions in some days. And so we're interested to understand more about how those differences can impact on productivity and quality from those two areas. So I think, Scott, we should pause now for me to have a drink and also to see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mark. We have no questions for you at this stage. I've been listening intently, and I think it's fascinating. Probably others will be doing the same. You maybe presenting extremely clearly and slowly, which is good. So far we have no questions. So without any questions, and assuming you've had a glass of water, perhaps you would just carry on for now.
Yeah, I have. So thank you. Yeah, so we're on to our second poll question now. So if we just go back, just go back to the slide. So now we're going to investigate the effect of row position on berry ripening and crop productivity. And so we're back to our second poll question here now, which is wanting to understand as growers, what methods do you use to try and forecast your class 1 yields over the next 7 to 10 days?
Thank you, Mark. So how do you forecast class 1 yields over the next 7 to 10 days? Again, you please select one of the 5 options. Do you estimate tonnages based on intuition and experience? Do you use previous year's cropping data to guide your estimates? Do you use a generic base temperature with a GDH-GDD model? Do you use a bespoke forecasting model developed in-house? Or do you use a forecasting model developed by a third party? So just one vote here, please select one. Okay, thank you very much for those of you who have voted. We're just waiting for the results, and there we are. You should be able to see the results. So, Mark, for your benefit, this time we've got a slightly clearer distinction between the answers. Top answer is the first one, estimating tonnages based on intuition and experience. 50% of those who have responded have chosen that option. And the second one, 30% have used previous year's cropping data to guide estimates. 10% have used a generic base temperature with the GDH or GDD model. Only 5% have used a bespoke forecasting model developed in-house, and 5% have used a forecasting model developed by a third party. So slightly more clear cut, but clearly the biggest response there, 50% have estimated tonnages based on intuition and experience. So that's interesting, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. That is interesting. Of course, that's the challenge, is forecasting yields over the next 7 to 10 days with our very changeable weather, of course, is very challenging. So one of the things we're trying to do at the Wet Centre then in an Innovate UK funded project is to develop forecasting tools to help growers to predict their yields more accurately. And so I've shown this slide several times before. This was back in 2018, and this is Marling centenary. And the graphs really just show the variability in yields in harvested crop on different days, depending on where the crop is growing in the polytunnel. So you can see there we have a leg row. So the leg row is obviously by the legs. The center row is in the center of the tunnel, and then there's a middle row then, which is between the center row and the leg row. And even though really mostly those rows are perhaps just 1 meter apart, you'll see that their position then has a very considerable impact on the rate of berry ripening. And of course, you'll know this from your own farms, that the fruit in the middle row and the center row, sorry, tend to ripen earlier than the middle and the leg row. And that's really what this data is showing us. And so, of course, this then complicates efforts by growers to estimate their yields. And so this is one of the factors that we're trying to overcome by developing a tool to help growers account for those differences in rate of ripening depending on which row the plants are in. And we're doing this work then is part of an Innovate UK funded project. So this is a project led by Berry Gardens, and you can see there our partners in this project. And so one of the outputs of this project is to develop a tool to help growers to be able to predict their Class 1 yields more accurately. So if we look at the effect of the leg row on air temperatures, this is just again data taken from that very warm period in June. You'll see there then that from the data then that rows 3 and 4 are the warmest over that particular time and also over the growing season. And you'll see row 6 is quite noticeably cooler during those days and over the growing season. The average is about 5% cooler in row 6. And row 6 at the Wet Centre is the east facing row near the legs. And again, row 1 is also, that's east facing. Row 1 is also cooler than row 4. And of course, we know that then these different air temperatures will affect the rate of fruit ripening. And so it's important to consider how these differences in row position affect rate of ripening and how that can be accounted for in any model that we develop to help to predict yields more accurately. So this is just a comparison of some of the thermal time models that are being used at the moment by growers. I think we said perhaps 10 or 15% of you were using thermal time models. Often in those models, there's a generic base temperature, and that is often 4.5 degrees Celsius. So that's used in many of these calculations. But as part of this Innovate UK funded project, our colleagues at Reading University have actually shown that base temperatures are variety specific, and so that there's quite a range in base temperatures depending which variety that that you're using, and that might range from, let's say, 1.8 degrees Celsius up to 7.5 degrees Celsius. So that range can have quite a significant effect then on our ability to forecast yields accurately, and using the incorrect base temperature will reduce the accuracy of those forecasts. And just an example here that we've worked on at the Wet Centre this year. So we developed a preliminary thermal time model. Just say colleagues in Reading developed this model in 2019, and we tested this at the Wet Centre in 2020. And we compared the base temperature of 5.8, which is a variety specific base temperature, with this rather general base temperature of 4.5 degrees. And you'll see there then in the table at the bottom, if we try and forecast anthesis using the predicted predicted date using the generic base temperature. That was actually 7 days too early if we used the 4.5 degrees C base temperature. But with the variety specific base temperature, we were just 1 day early. You'll see then the first fruit in the first flush, again too early with the generic base temperature, and spot on with the variety specific base temperature. And again, if you go towards peak harvest, then too early with the generic model, and sort of a couple of days early with the predicted model. So we've done more work. Colleagues in Reading have done more work this year to try to improve these thermal time, variety specific thermal time models. And we're now looking at incorporating the effects of PAR and thermal time in terms of being able to predict the rate of ripening. But you can see there, hopefully, then, that these models will give us a far better way, a more accurate way to forecast yields in our very changeable environment. So, as well as class 1 rate of ripening being affected by row position, of course, we also see final yields affected by row position, and we reported this this last year. And so you'll see there just a photograph of the rows in the wet center. So as I say, the leg row there on the left, the middle row in the center, and the center row towards the right of the photograph. And those rows are only 1 meter apart. Yet same plants planted at the same time, same pest and disease applications, same watering, same fertilizer applications. Yet you'll see there in the tables quite significant changes or differences in the class 1 yield per plant. And you'll see there row 4 highlighted in the commercial area. So in row 4, plants gave an average of 1,323 grams per plant. But if we extrapolate that to a hectare, that gives us 74 tons a hectare. And you'll see then just 2 meters away then, in row 6, the plants were only producing 1,177 grams per plant, and that extrapolates to 65.8 tons a hectare. So this very real and significant difference in cropping potential of these plants in those different rows. And of course, we're interested to understand why, because the challenge is then is to try to make those plants in row 6 then deliver the same cropping potential as those plants in row 4. So to make every plant as good as the best plant is the challenge. And you'll see exactly the same situation in the advanced area as well. This very significant effect of row position, not only on the rate of ripening, but also on the cropping potential. And so we're interested to understand more about why that might be the case. So we'll come on back to our graph of PAR, and you'll see here an expanded version that shows you very clearly this exceptional year we've had in 2020 when it comes to photosynthetically active radiation. And of course, this increase in PAR coincided with with planting in perhaps mid-March, early April, and it remained high all throughout May then, and you can see there all throughout the season. It's been quite an exceptional year in terms of light intensity. So we know that light is essential for photosynthesis, and you'll see there just the graph on the left-hand side. This is just a graph showing you the effects of the increasing light intensity on the x-axis and how that affects the rate of photosynthesis, which is on the y-axis. And you'll see there during that linear part of the graph then, as we increase the light intensity, photosynthesis then increases in a linear fashion until we reach a point that's called the light saturation point. And that in this graph is around 800 micromoles per meter squared per second. And that is a point then where any further light doesn't increase the rate of photosynthesis any further. And so it's important for us to know what the light saturation point is for some of the varieties that we're growing. And the figure on the right-hand side there, that's the difference in PAR received by plants in each of the rows of the wet center. So you'll see there row 1 received, which is the blue line, received quite high light in the morning and then sort of tailed off in the afternoon. Row 6, which is the sort of the pinky purple line, that had lower light intensities in the morning, and of course as the sun moved round to the west, then the light intensity increased. And you'll see rows 3 and 4 there in the middle, which have a good distribution of light throughout the day in those 2 center rows. So we know then we can work out how much light the plants are receiving in those different rows. And we know from that sort of analysis then that, for example, plants in row 4 receive 2 hours of PAR above this figure of 800 micromoles per meter square per second every day compared to plants in row 1. So they're getting more light and more of the light that drives photosynthesis. And so if we then look at the yields per row and then look at the total PAR accumulated over the growing season, and also look at the number of hours that PAR was above this light saturation point of 800 micromoles per meter square per second, you'll see there that the total, both the total accumulated PAR and the number of hours over 800, they match yields very closely in those rows. And so you'll see the highest yields in rows 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the commercial area, and you'll see their correspondingly high values of total PAR accumulation and also total hours above PAR. So there's quite a nice correlation then between the plants, the PAR that the plants are receiving and their yield potential. So the correlation is about 75%. So PAR is very important, but of course there are also other factors involved as well, and that's what we're continuing to investigate in the wet centre this year. But you can see there then that PAR might start to explain some of the difference between these the yields we're seeing in the commercial tunnels compared to the yields we're seeing in the advanced area. And just a point to note, you'll see there, interestingly, that the plants in row 1 are producing more yield than we would have expected based upon their PAR alone, either the total amount of PAR received or the number of hours over 800 micromoles per meter square per second. So there's something interesting happening in row 1 in both of those cropping areas. And we're interested to see whether there's a diurnal difference in photosynthetic efficiency, for example, and that's what's contributing to the relatively higher yields we're seeing from plants in row 1, given the level of PAR that those plants are intercepting. So we'll be investigating that more carefully in 2021. And of course, what we want to try and do then is to raise the yields, for example, in row 6 to try to match those in rows 3 and 4. And of course, one way to do that in the wet centre, in the advanced area then, is to develop a smart venting control system. And so what we want to be able to do is to control venting to increase light interception into the different rows. And you'll see there, this is just a graph taken from a day earlier this year, where we were venting to allow PAR to increase in those different rows. And of course, when the vents are open, then the sun can shine straight through and the light intensity increases. And you can see there if we look at row 6, which is a sort of pinky purple line, you'll see there around sort of just after midday, then a very sudden and rapid rise in PAR that then stays high throughout most of the afternoon. And of course, that's the sun moving around from east to west, going past solar noon, and then reaching the point at which the sun can shine directly on the plants in row 6. And so by developing these smart venting strategies, we hope to be able to increase light interception, and hopefully that will drive an increase in yield in those plants. So we'll report more on the success of that strategy next year. And so I think then this is just the final section. So I think any questions, and if not, there's a poll question to follow, I think.
Thank you, Mark. Just one question here that I have actually for you is, next year, will you be actually, when you're running in the IUK project, when you're running the models, will you be incorporating PAR within the model next year to assess the effect of that?
Yes, we are. So those experiments are just being completed at Reading this year as part of the Innovate project. And so Paul and Carrie will be sharing those integrated models with us, and we'll be using those in the wet centre next year.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. That's all for now.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
So do you want to take us on to your next question?
Yeah, so this is really trying to understand which factors inform your decisions on the choice of coir bag colour. And so we'll just go in the final session, just go into a little investigation into the effects of bag colour on crop productivity. So I'm just interested to understand what you base your decisions on when you choose your coir bags.
Okay, that's quite clear. Now, on this occasion, you can choose more than one option. You can please select all that supply. So which factors inform your decisions on choosing coir bag colour? You've got a choice there of 5 to support early cropping potential, to help mitigate against hot summer weather, to increase canopy light interception, to better manage canopy microclimate, or whatever colour is available. So please select as many that apply to you, and we shall wait and see what the result is, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Okay, I think we're complete, and we'll wait for the results, which are now through. Quite a mix here. So I'll run through the mark from the top. First answer was to support early cropping potential. 65% have ticked that box. Second, to help mitigate against hot summer weather. 70% have ticked that box, so that's obviously high. Third option was to increase canopy light interception. We have 26% have ticked that. To better manage canopy microclimate, 39% have clicked that. And finally, whatever colour is available, only 4% have clicked that. So I suppose that's probably good news. That people have got a choice, and they are thinking about it and trying to choose the most appropriate for their system. So hopefully that will help you, Mark, as well. And it also leads nicely into what you're going to talk about next.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Scott. Thank you, everybody. So yes, an investigation then into the effects of white versus black Cocogreen bags on yield potential. And you might remember from 2018, and I showed these graphs then, that there was a highly significant effect of bag colour on yield of marling centenary at that time. And so a 10% increase in yields from plants growing in white Cocogreen bags versus plants growing in black Cocogreen bags. And this was not due to an effect in terms of row position within the polytunnel. So of course this raised several questions. Or do white bags reflect more light and raise PAR? And does that drive photosynthesis then? And do the higher temperatures that we see in the black bags then affect root respiration and alter resource partitioning in the plant? And so you'll see there the graph on the right hand side. That's during that very warm spell in the summer of 2018, we were seeing temperature differences in black bags of around sort of 4 degrees during the day, 4 degrees warmer during the day in black bags, and up to a degree warmer during the night as well. So we're interested to understand more in 2020 about why we were seeing this difference in yield between the white Cocogreen bags and the black Cocogreen bags. So this is data from this year, and you'll see then this is a graph of the temperature difference between the black bags and the white bags. So the higher the percent difference, the warmer the black bags. And as you might expect, you can see there then as we go through the season, the temperature in the black bags starts off to be quite considerably warmer than the white bags. And as we go through the season and the canopy closes, then that temperature difference starts to decline. But even though we go through into September and October, of course, there's still a warmer rhizosphere in the black Cocogreen bags. So this very early increase in temperature is what we would expect. When the canopy closes, that change in temperature, that difference in temperature, starts to fall away, but it's still maintained throughout the cropping season. And this is just again some data to show you some diurnal data of the sorts of temperature differences we were seeing this year in June and throughout the season. And although we didn't see changes of 4 degrees, there were certainly 2-3 degrees warmer in the black Cocogreen bags at different times during the season. So this very clear effect on rhizosphere temperature then in the black Cocogreen bags. And you can see here then when we start to look at the class 1 yields per plant, we again saw this difference of 5% higher. So the yields from the plants growing in the white bags were 5% higher compared to those plants growing in the black bags. And the soluble solids content percent Brix was very similar. So there's no difference again in the waste between the black and the white bags. some evidence of higher PAR in the canopy above the white bags earlier in the season, but that tended to be limited to specific times of day and of course decreased over the growing season as the canopy closed. And we did see then this increase, this change in berry fresh weight when we approached that very warm weather. You'll remember at from the 6th or 7th of August onwards, it was very warm for a few days, and we did start to see then a divergence in the berry fresh weight from plants growing in white Cocogreen bags versus the black bags. So the graph here shows us the individual berry fresh weight, and again then the black bags is in the blue and the white bag is in the red, and you'll see there on two occasions then following that sort of very hot weather in June, and again during the hot weather in and around the hot weather in August, then we start to see a reduction in berry fresh weight from plants that are growing in the black Cocogreen bags. And you'll see there the table on the right hand side. There was a difference in fresh weight, but there's also a difference in class 1 berry number. So again, we saw higher number of class 1 berries in the white bags compared to growing in the black bags. So we did see an increase in fruit fresh weight in the white bags and a greater number of fruit. And so of course we're interested to understand whether these higher temperatures in the black bags then cause a higher rate of root respiration, and whether that, as I say, whether that changes resource allocation that then results in some of these differences in berry number and berry size that we're seeing. And we're also noticed then in the plants in the black bags during that very warm weather, the plants in the black bags often needed an extra irrigation event in, let's say, between 8 and midday. They often needed an extra irrigation event to maintain the coir within the optimum range. So the plants in the black bags then transpired and used more water. So you can see there 52 litres per plant rather than the 44 litres per plant that plants growing in the white bags did. So there does seem to be this effect on plant water use, on rhizosphere temperature, and on berry fresh weight, and of course on berry number. And of course this is in the wet centre, obviously in the UK. Is a pattern we've seen before in 2018, and obviously you remember it was very hot temperatures in 2018. And also we've had some very hot weather this year as well. So interesting to understand a little bit more about how the bag colour changes the physiology and cropping potential of those plants. So that's almost it. I think we're nearly out of time. Just to say, those of you who have seen any webinars from the Wet Centre will have noticed we have a comparison of different plastics, different films. I'll talk perhaps hopefully in the new year about some of the effects of the film, this yellow film, some of the effects on plant physiology and cropping potential and berry quality, and I hope to be able to tell you about that in the new year. And then of course, as well as the strawberry wet centre, we've also got a crop of Marling Bella and Marling Charm, and we're doing lots of work there in Innovate UK funded projects, understanding how we can match fertigation demand with supply. And so I'll hopefully be able to tell you more about that in the next webinar session. So just to say again, to thank our collaborators on the Wet Centre, and you'll see here some contact details if you have any questions about anything I've spoken about today, or in general perhaps about the Wet Centre, and also then some contact details for some of the Innovate UK projects we're doing, and then the precision irrigation package, and also the rainwater harvesting system we have at the Wet Centre. So I think, Scott, that's my final slide. I'd just like to thank my team here at East Marling, who've done a fantastic job this year under very challenging circumstances. Very, very grateful for all their help and support and commitment over this season. And I extend that also to our farm team at East Marling. They've done a fantastic job picking those half rows to the level of accuracy that they have. And of course, I should also mention that we have ongoing support provided by the Berry Gardens agronomy team. And so thanks to Justas and his team for helping with pest and disease advice.
Thank you, Mark. we're not going to let you go just yet because we've got a few extra questions have come in, if you're happy to take those now.
Yeah, certainly.
We've got one here which I'm not quite sure I fully understand the question. Are there any yield differences from bag and wire and gutter systems?
The honest answer is I don't know, because we don't have that system here at the wet centre. So I think that's something that needs to be investigated in those particular growing systems. But interested perhaps to have a conversation about what we might expect in those systems. So perhaps the question can be answered in more detail after the webinar.
Okay, well, if the questioner wants to contact Mark, I'm sure Mark would be happy to take that up with you. Another question here, as the black bags used more water than the white bags, was there any increase in disease pressure brought about by the increased humidity, if indeed there was any increase in humidity?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And so we were wanting to measure the phytoclimate above the white bags and the black bags, and so we placed little sensors in the canopy just above the crowns, above the white and black bags. And although we were looking at temperature and humidity and vapor pressure deficit, and although there were small differences, there wasn't a marked difference in the humidity around the crop in the black bags compared to the white bags. And so we put those sensors in probably around June, July time, and so as part of the experiments for next year, we'll put those sensors in right from the very beginning of the season, so we can answer that question in more detail. But certainly nothing noticeable we've seen so far.
Thank you, Mark. A few more. Any thoughts on tunnel colour and bag colour? And I think you've answered the bag colour question. Any thoughts on tunnel colour at this stage?
So I think bag colour, the black bags are used in specific circumstances and they work very well. I think obviously the growers are already making informed choices about the bag colour that they choose. As for plastic colour, yes, as I say, some very clear effects on plant physiology, photosynthesis, yield, and berry quality that I'll be able to explain in more detail perhaps in the next session.
Good. Any effects on the frequency of picking? Is that something you recorded? Presumably you have that information.
Yeah, so here at the farm, you'll appreciate it was a challenging year this year for all sorts of reasons, and so we tend to pick at the wet centre twice per week, and then during the heavy cropping phases 3 times a week. And so we haven't what we haven't got is different picking dates for different growing systems. We have the different yields picked at those different times. So I'm not really sure we can answer that question from the data we have at the moment, Scott.
Okay, this next one I suspect you might not be able to answer either. We've talked a lot about differences in row position in terms of yields. Have you noticed any differences in yields within individual rows?
Well, yes, and so that's a good question. And so what we were doing last year was looking at the yield profile in the north and the middle and the south end of the rows. And so our rows at the wet centre are 50 metres, so not particularly long, but there was, you could see differences in yield, in cropping potential, depending on whether the plants were at the north or the middle or the south end of the row. So this year we just compared north and south, and there was a slight increase in yield interestingly towards the south end of the commercial area and towards the north end of the advanced area. But if you know the wet centre, that's the area where the gravel is in the middle of the 2 polytunnels. So I suspect that was related to a temperature difference in the north and south ends that sort of was probably influenced by the heating of the gravel. So yes, there's definitely variation along the row as well as between the rows and between the tunnels. Yeah.
You leave no stone unturned, Mark, in this wet centre, I see. Okay, one or two more. With regards to GDH being variety specific, can we find out what they are for each variety?
Yes, and so that's some of the work we're doing now with our colleagues in the University of Reading in the Berry Predictor project, which, as I say, is an Innovate UK funder project led by Berry Gardens. And so in that project we're looking to investigate looking to identify the variety-specific base temperatures for you know, a lot of the commercially grown sort of varieties that are out there at the moment. And so so we've probably got preliminary base temperatures for 6 or 7 different varieties. And of course, then we'll have checked those again this season. And then, as I mentioned earlier on, we're wanting to incorporate the effects of PAR as well. So yes, in probably at the end of very predictive project in 2022, hopefully we'll be able to release those temperature specific base, variety specific base temperatures to help growers use the the output from the project to be able to predict their yields more accurately.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We're going to keep this, we've now reached 11 o'clock, but I think I want to keep this just open for a bit longer because we are getting flooded with questions here for you. So please stay with us if you can. We've got a question here about plant density. Just bear with me. Hang on. Yeah, somebody asking just confirmation, was Malling Champion planted at a density of 8 plants per bag?
Yes, it was 8 plants per linear meter. That's right. Yeah.
8 plants per linear meter. Okay, thanks for clarifying. Next question: is there a corresponding increase in fertilizer usage in the black bags compared to the white bags? I think probably because you're using slightly more water there. Is there a corresponding increase in fertilizer use?
Yes, obviously we fertigate as often when we irrigate, and so those plants will have also had slightly more fertilizer. So we can't really look at individual requirements at the wet centre, but what we plan to do next year is perhaps do a separate experimental or separate experiment looking in more detail exactly about how the white and black bags, as I say, how they influence productivity, photosynthesis, but also then water and fertilizer requirements.
Okay. Were there any differences in size of fruit based on a coir bag choice? So that's the size of fruit, was that affected by the bag choice?
Yeah, I think in one of the tables I showed you there was an effect of fruit number and of fruit size, and so yes, and a difference in berry fresh weight that seemed to be most apparent after the very warm weather we had in June and again in August.
So just to clarify, the white bags were producing slightly larger fruit?
Yeah, slightly larger fruit and slightly more class 1 fruit.
Yeah, okay. Although this research was on black and white plastic difference, is there any consideration on the use of red coloured plastic bags in similar environments?
We haven't done that, but so no, we haven't done that, and we don't plan to do that in 2021. But it's something that we could, as I say, perhaps incorporate into a separate side experiment that we can, we can do more replication. So so it'll give us more flexibility on understanding how different bag colours can be, used to improve crop productivity. So no, that's an interesting thought.
Okay, this appears to be the last question, and quite a very useful question, I think. Somebody was asking, can we have a glossary of abbreviated terms and acronyms, please? I know you use GDHs and PARs, and yeah, I think that's a very good question, and I think growers and agronomists might find that helpful, Mark, in future. I know you do clarify these as you go through your talk, but sometimes it's useful to have those. So something maybe we those of us involved in disseminating the results can think about in future and try and provide a list of abbreviations and acronyms.
Well, I think we probably have most of that in the glossaries that accompany annual and final reports, Scott, and so I think that's a very good idea, and we could pull that together very quickly and perhaps share it on the AHDB website and also on the Wet Centre website.
Yeah, I think so. And just to make that point, for people that are not aware, all of the information that Mark has presented, results from each year of the work programmes at the Wet Centre are presented on the Wet Centre website. So there are two Wet Centre websites. There's an official Wet Centre website, and there's also an AHDB strategic page website for Wet Centre, and we will list all the results on there. Just one or two very nice questions coming back. Somebody's joined us from Ireland this morning, thoroughly enjoyed it and wishing everybody a Merry Christmas. Somebody asking how they will see the recording. The recording is normally made available and uploaded to the AHDB website within a week. So if you wait, I mean, you might want to wish to wait till Christmas morning and then watch it with the family. It should be on the website next week, I hope. And you can watch it again. If you're trying to find it, if you just search on Google or another search engine for Wet Centre webinar, you should find it. Or the other place to look is just search for AHDB webinars, and that will take you to our webinar page. And if you click on horticulture, you will see a whole list of horticultural webinars. Some other very nice messages coming through, which I will try and read to you. Thanks for a great presentation, very interesting, wishing everybody a happy Christmas, very thought-provoking. So Mark, some great responses there from everybody that's listening. So I'm just going to finish off now. Hopefully you can see me by taking you to my final page, if you just bear with me. Technology is not working just now.
Okay, just to wrap up, apologies, I think Scott's not available at the moment, but just to wrap up, the webinar will be available on the website, the AHDB website next week. Basis and Noroso are available. If you can email myself, myaarchitecture@ahdb.org.uk, or either email them to Scott, he will forward them on to me. Hope you enjoyed the webinar, and thank you very much, Mark, and thank you everybody, and a Merry Christmas to everyone as well. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.